back for a bonus episode. I am Sweetcard. That is Shashot. We are in the thick of the playoff race. We have advice. We have been doing this all year. We've been doing this for 2-3 years now. And Shashot and I in the playoffs, in our main league, in the playoffs, in all of our leagues. So we have a track record. We know how this game is played, and we have some advice that we think is important to players who are playing fantasy football, specifically, heading into the playoffs and what to do and what not to do. I'll kick us off, Shashot. I got one of my biggest ones. It's a really obvious one, to be honest, is, and I think you can talk about this very firmly because you mentioned it on our last episode. Your lineup is so set in stone that you're not making many changes, right? Very minimal. Right. Set it and forget it. These are the guys that got me here. I want to play the same guys. Well, the difference in playoffs is you can still set it and forget it in terms of your players. But what's really important is you and I are sitting here with a first round bye. So our first matchup that's important is week 16. Now we could sit here and be like, dude, we don't really need to care about this week. We'll just wait till next week. But what we actually should be doing is seeing who the projections say is going to win, who the players are setting their lineups as to give us an idea of who's got a better shot to win, what their week 16 lineup matchup looks like against us. And then the spots that you can get a advantage, the defense, and the kicker, because let's be real, you're in the playoffs. Your main players are probably pretty much set in stone, but where you have the advantage are the kickers and the defenses. And I know you want to talk a little bit more about that, so I'll let you elaborate a little bit on that.
It's such a big part of playing with kickers and defenses. It's such a huge advantage. People talk about getting rid of those guys, and I'm like, dude, you're leaving it up to more chance if you get rid of kickers and defenses, because it's easy to pick another starting running back for another team, put them on your side. What did it take you? Nothing. You just found the best available player. You put them on there. Defenses don't work like that. Kickers don't work like that. There's so much more thinking, so much more of a better fantasy player you have to be to make a decision on kicking and defense, because there's the amount of variables that come into play. We've talked about this so many times in all of our podcasts before and everything, so I'm not going to get into many details on it. But, you don't ever draft multiple defenses because you don't know how the season's going to play out. But by the end of the season, you better be holding on to 2 or 3 defenses. And that sounds like a crazy way to move. But, if you have only 4 players on your bench, that you can't really go about doing this method. But if you have 7 players on your bench, if you have 6 players on your bench, you can clearly do this. Okay. So there's two pieces of advice I'm going to combine into one. Okay. Find backups for all of your starters, not for their actual team, but find a backup that is just as good or just tiny bit worse than your actual player. So like I mentioned on our last podcast, like if you have a Lamar Jackson, you should have thought about this. You should see how your team is. And my goal is to make the playoffs. What do I do when I go to make the playoffs, right? You don't want to be derailed with injury and have to start Jordan Love begrudgingly, correct? So what you want is to have that confidence every week until you win the championship. And the only way you can do that is have a reputable backup that you can insert in when Lamar Jackson get hurt. When everybody else in your group chat's like, oh shit, Lamar Jackson just went to the tent, you're just like, it doesn't fucking matter because Kyler Murray's going to be coming in next week, right? So that's the energy you want to have for your quarterback, running back, and wide receiver. Tight ends are a whole different story, but I actually have that for tight end as well. Like if Hawkinson goes down, Laporta comes in. I'm not as confident, but I'm more confident than anybody else that loses their tight end. So that's the energy you want to have by the end of week 14, going into the playoffs where you lose a player. It doesn't matter. Any given Sundays, you have a replacement available. That's advice number one. And that connects me to the advice that Sweetcard mentioned earlier, as far as defenses go. You don't draft multiple defenses, but you end the season with multiple defenses. Meaning, if you're sitting pretty, if you know you made the playoffs or you're going to make the playoffs or you want to make the playoffs, if your end game is a championship, you have to be prepared for these championships, okay? Because all of this is for nothing if that's the case. You got to look into week 16 weathers. You need to look at week 16, defensive matchups, all of that. We talked a little bit about that earlier, but multiple defenses when week 14 ends, going into week 15 is crucial. And like Sweetcard said, if you're not playing week 16, that's fine. Go ahead and pick up that Baltimore Ravens defense that's a free agent now because that wasn't the best case scenario a week ago or whatever. It's that next level move that is something the rest of the league is not thinking about that will solidify your chances of winning the championship. No one's saying you're going to win the championship by doing these methods, but your chances of winning your championship increases in an increment fashion, the more prepared you are for the following week.
That's it. I mean, when push comes to shove, to dumb this down as basic as possible, is just be ahead of the curve with a lot of this stuff, right? It's just all it requires is for you to put a little bit extra effort than everybody else. And it's not that hard in terms of the effort that you have to put. Like you said, you can create your roster and you can be like, this is my team. These are the backups to my team, and I'm set for the playoffs. You and I, again, waiting till week 16. There's players in week 15 we talk about, man, I don't want to have to face this guy in the semifinals. Oh, I would much rather face this guy. Well, let's look at the guy that I don't want to face. Let's see what his lineup's looking like. Is he one of the guys that just lost a quarterback for the season? Is he a guy that lost Justin Herbert? Is he a guy that lost Alexander Madison? Those guys are going to be dying to pick up these players. You may not be benching Lamar Jackson. I may not be benching Josh Allen, but you and I both, if Matthew Stafford's out there, you bet your damn ass we're going to pick up Matthew Stafford so that nobody else in the playoffs can debate playing Matthew Stafford in an easy matchup. So you're blocking your opponents essentially, right? And that's the flexibility you get when you play with the bye. So being the 1 or 2 seed, you have a whole week of basically just playing defense. You're playing defense against your opponents that are already playing, and then against your potential opponents that you're going to face in the semifinals. So I think for us, it's even tougher because it's a 4-man bench on sleeper. So you really, really have to be smart about who is on your bench. Does it make more sense to handcuff a guy like Elijah Mitchell for a perennial CMC, even though you don't have CMC, but CMC could in week 17 maybe get benched, right? That's the other thing you think about. Who's locking up that first round bye so their team may bench them in week 17, which is your championship week. So that is something you have to think about. Now, luckily, I don't see a team right now that's far above the next team to where that could be a thing. Maybe the 49ers are the closest thing there, but even the Cowboys are kind of right on their ass. So I don't know that they're going to be able to bench anybody, but that's another thing that's important. But the Elijah Mitchell comparison to me showed it's like, would you rather have Elijah Mitchell on your bench who is nobody unless CMC gets hurt? But if CMC gets hurt, he is everybody. Or Tajay Spears, who is not nobody even when Henry's in, right? He's actually pretty good. He catches the ball. When they're down, he's used well, and he can get you a pretty decent floor. But, that's the best that he is unless Henry gets hurt, right? So which one becomes more valuable? Because Tajay is not a player that you're probably going to be confidently throwing into your lineup unless Henry's hurt, but he's the kind of guy that does have some value if one of your running backs is out and, everybody else on the waivers is backups or nobodies. You have a guy that at least splits the carries, gets catches, and can put up fantasy points. So like those are little examples and that I'm just kind of coming up with. But I think ultimately you're just playing defense. You just need to be one step ahead of everybody. And it's kind of really that simple. So that's kind of what I had on that end. I know you have something else that you want to talk about. This seems like a no-brainer, but I know you still have to kind of hammer it home because some people just don't quite listen to it.
Yeah. I mean, don't overthink it. I know what we just talked to you about sounds like overthinking, but it's really not. Just slow it down and just think about what we just said. It makes total sense. When I'm saying don't overthink it, I'm talking about, I keep using this analogy, but don't bench Lamar Jackson for Kyler because you're scared of, the defensive matchup. No, actually, that's not how you should proceed. You should want a tough matchup for your good quarterbacks on a good team because that just means he has to play until the end of the game, right? So these are the type of ways you have to start thinking. You can't just look at the forecast or you can't just look at the projections and be like, oh, this guy's predicted more than this. Let me start them. These are human beings creating this. You can always outsmart another human being if you have enough data points. So if you have enough reasoning for why Kyler Murray should start over Lamar, go for it. Your reasoning might not be good, but as long as you can tell yourself you're confidently making a decision, go for it. But again, don't overthink it. Okay. These guys have taken you this far. Okay. These guys have taken this far. Look at how many points they've put up, right? Lamar is a weird one to bring up because he's one of those players that you could possibly have these debatable conversations, but this is a straight up strength of schedule and who they're playing the rest of the schedule answer for me. Because if it was 3 weeks ago, I was debating that. I was like, should I start him? Should I not? But that's not the playoffs. This is the playoffs where you go home if you make a wrong decision. So if you have a quarterback that doesn't have, has a pretty cakewalk of a schedule as far as easy teams to play against, then you may really look into the Kyler Murrays and these other backups because you're like, I need 60 minutes of play in the playoffs. I need all the points I can get. I can't have my players sitting, like if you have a Tua the chances of him sitting is higher than a lot of other players because of how many points they score. So maybe think about Matthew Stafford over Tua because he'll play the whole game. So these are the strategies you need to implement, but don't overthink it by benching your studs because of the matchups they have. The bad matchups are actually good matchups when it comes to fantasy football playoffs because your studs will be playing their ass off till the end. And if you've drafted them, you trust them to bring you points, they most likely will. So trust your studs. Don't do anything cute. And bad defenses or really, really good defenses that are bad to play in fantasy are actually, that equals more fantasy points for your quarterback position. So that's the advice I got from that perspective.
Yeah, no, I think it's all good. It's not rocket science, guys. We're not sitting here trying to preach to you a bunch of stuff that takes a lot of information and a lot of brain power to conceptualize. It's very easy. So just be one step ahead of the game, be one step ahead of your league mates. And that's the difference between you having a legitimate shot to win it all. So again, you're listening to two guys who have done their fair share of winning. We're both in the playoffs in our league of record. Both have the first round bye. Shishot's the 1 seed. I'm the 2 seed. So there's no better people to listen to and take advice from than me and him. Shishot, you got anything else for playoffs for folks who are in the playoffs?
No, don't sleep on weather. Do not sleep on weather. It's winter time. Shit's going to be going down. And that's another part of this. Don't start your studs, overthink your studs. When it comes to weather, you might have to overthink your studs. So use that as a stepping stone to make your decisions. Look at the weather.
Absolutely. If you guys got any questions, any start sit 'em, we're at Twitter at Only Playbook, Instagram at The Only Playbook, TikTok at The Only Playbook. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the like, hit the subscribe. It helps spread the word. If you're listening, you can find us on any place you get your podcasts at. I am Sweetcard. That is Shishot. We are The Only Playbook. Again, good luck in your playoff matchups. If you're on a bye, do not sit pretty. Make sure you are prepared for the following week. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Again, good luck.